Welcome, everyone. As you might know, my name is Zach Schulman, class of 1987, and then law school 1990. I direct the Entrepreneurship at Cornell program that we like to call it E@C. And thank you so much for joining us today for our latest webinar, brought to you by the Cornell Entrepreneur Network, CEN, and also E@C. As you probably know, we have some extraordinary entrepreneurs that have graduated from Cornell. And today we're delighted to have John No join us. And I'll get to that in just one second. Before we get started, a couple of quick housekeeping items. As normal, the format will be a conversation with some Q&A. We'll be weaving in your questions that were submitted in advance, as well as taking your questions live via chat. Please use the chat for your questions and select all panelists and attendees so people can see your questions. That helps me because I try to monitor things simultaneously, so we cut out repetitive questions. We're also recording the program so you can view it later. You can see it on both the CEN live stream channel as well as the Entrepreneurship at Cornell YouTube channel. You can also see all the prior episodes as well. We're building up quite a collection. It's actually kind of fun. Okay, you ready, John? Let's get started. So John No.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, John No has some true, what I call internet age stories, because he graduated from Cornell in 1999, which was the height of the internet bubble. And I know a lot of you are familiar with that time. Very, very interesting indeed. John's the founder of Roken, as we just discussed earlier. Roken rhymes with smoking as opposed to broken, smoking as in hot. So he founded Roken. He grew it for a long number of years. And then he successfully sold it to Publicis, and we'll talk about that a bit later. And now he's actually leading a Korean alcohol brand that also has a bunch of Cornell connections. So we're kind of keeping it in the family. So John, welcome to our show. Great to spend the next hour with you. And I'm also just want to say thanks for spending an hour or whenever that was a couple of weeks ago, so we could get further acquainted. I really appreciated that. I think your story is just really interesting and cool, and got some interesting twists and turns.
Mostly twists and turns.
Lots of twists and turns. I want to mention you are the first architecture, art, and planning alum to be featured, which I think is also pretty fabulous. So awesome. Let's start with your early years. Your parents immigrated from South Korea and then settled in Texas. As I understand it, they started a donut shop of all things, right? That did pretty well. And they put you to work at the donut shop, which I'm not sure if you always appreciated. Maybe you did. They put you through private school and somehow got you up at Cornell. But I'm actually curious, you're from Texas originally. How did you pick Cornell?
I think my parents probably made the choice for me, being immigrants coming from Korea. And back then, it's practically a third world country. So the whole idea of sending your kids to an Ivy League college was a big deal for them. And so they really wanted me to be either a doctor or a lawyer. And I didn't want to do either. Can't stand the sight of blood whatsoever. And I used to draw and paint all the time, and I was into math. And so they decided that I should go into architecture. And so, obviously we had the conversation, and it seemed like a good fit, kind of the best of both worlds. I really just wanted to go into art. I just wanted to paint and draw for the rest of my life. Okay. I don't think they saw that as being a viable future, although it feels like that's pretty much all I do these days. So they pushed me toward architecture. I applied to Cornell and I got in, luckily. And there were a couple of places I wanted to go to.
Yeah, where else did you want to go? I'm actually curious. Like, was Cornell your first choice, or was it their first choice?
It was anywhere Ivy League was their first choice. I really wanted to go to RISD. I wanted to go into art, and it was just something that I loved since I was really, really young, and that's all I wanted to do. But they pushed me toward the architecture school, and I'm obviously glad that they did, because it was amazing. I had the best time. Yeah. But yeah, to answer the question, it was more their decision than mine. But at the time, probably wasn't making the smartest choices anyway. So it's kudos to
Right.
them.
Well, it's tough for people when they're that young. By the way, is some of the art behind you your art?
Yeah. So actually, a lot of them are from Cornell. That one's from Cornell. That was from a drawing class, and that was from a painting class. This one I just bought online. My wife took those when we were
Okay.
dating,
Okay.
and these are my kids.
Nice. I
Yeah.
also see you have one of your kids on your coffee mug. You
Yes.
can. Yep.
This,
That's
this
great.
is this is my daughter Emerson.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so you enjoyed your time at Cornell and up in Ithaca. But by the way, for anybody who cares, yesterday it was 85 or 88, and today, right now, my computer's saying it's 57. So it's classic Ithaca weather. It's like freezing. It feels freezing out today after we've had such nice weather. Okay, so post Cornell, you graduated in 1999. You spent you spent a short time at a very famous architecture firm, right?
Yeah.
And I think your experience was a little suboptimal.
Yeah.
Tell us about
Yeah.
that a bit.
So that was actually maybe the summer of '98 because it was an
Okay.
internship that I had.
Okay.
And I think architecture is a really cool business. I think at the place that I went to, they had me going into like abandoned office buildings and just counting ceiling tiles all day by myself, and then coming and putting it in AutoCAD and whatnot. And so once I finished my final year, I had friends who were going into the digital space. The whole .com bubble was booming at the time. And so I, through a friend of a friend, interviewed at a place. And then I applied and they said, I had a great portfolio, but they couldn't hire me because I'd never done anything in the business before. They're not building buildings. So I went back to school and I bought a book that said how to design a website in 7 days. And I made a website, sent it over to him. And then I
And you
think he
said, boom, here's my
appreciated it.
portfolio.
Basically, it had animated GIFs and everything. I was so proud of myself. And then he gave me the job, or at least gave me an offer. And I had an offer at another architecture firm at the time. And so it's a sort of red pill, blue pill moment.
Okay.
And then just decided to take the leap. And I wanted to try this new crazy space that was still being defined. And so it was a big digital agency. And that place was awesome. I was only there for a little bit. I was there for maybe a year, and then decided to start my own company, which at the time was both a great and terrible idea.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that in just 1 second. But
yeah,
would you say that the experience at the big firm during your internship, kind of catalyzed you to eventually start your own business, or were you not even thinking about it then? Like, I'm kind of curious as to what gave you the drive to start your own business.
I don't really. It was one of those moments that just happened. It was never planned. Even so, I have 3 kids now. Like for the longest time, for 6 years at the beginning of our marriage, never talked about kids, never wanted to have kids. My wife was worried that I would never want to have kids. I remember one morning I was in the shower and I came out of the shower. I was like, oh my God, Jenny, I want to have babies. And I never changed my mind ever again, So I think starting a company was sort of similar. It was never a thought. It was never a plan. I mean, I grew up in my parents' donut store and I saw how difficult that was and how, they worked around the clock all the time. So I didn't really see it as a glamorous thing.
Right.
Maybe it was like embedded in the back of my mind, sort of that foundational layer. But I wasn't really wanting to do it until one moment, in 2000.
It's kind of clicked. That's
yeah,
interesting.
It's weird.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm looking at the chat. There's another architecture grad on the webinar, and there's a different person whose parents also owned a bakery, and they're saying it's very, very hard work, which obviously it is.
Yeah,
that's actually kind of fun. Okay, so you started Roken in 2000, is that right?
Yep.
2000. And you had one customer when you started?
I think we had 0 customers.
Okay.
We just started. It's really easy to start a company. Just say you're going to do it, and you form an LLC, and you're off to the races.
Yeah.
But we and I think we started the company every which way you shouldn't. No customers, no money, no experience, because I had a year of professional experience under my belt. The partner that I started the company with, Chung, He was still in college and not done yet. So wasn't the best timing. And so we just banged on doors. We've friends of friends. The first few clients that we had were really, really small. A skateboard shop in New Jersey, a weight loss pill, just random eclectic bunch of clients that weren't sexy by any means, but super, super good to us. And so that sort of helped us kind of get started.
Yep. So just to be clear, so this was a website development company?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you were just like, I got a little experience in this. I want to develop websites for other people, or other companies that'll give me an artistic expression and outlet, obviously, right? And did these early customers give you that type of independence and flexibility, or they just say, I want it to look like this, go ahead and build it?
There was a lot of flexibility. I'd spent most of my time, on the creative side. So that was the reason why I got into the business. I didn't want to be a CEO or do sales or run a company at the time. You don't realize all the things you need to do to run a business. You just kind of want to do your craft. So I think we got lucky. A lot of the clients that we had gave us a lot of creative flexibility, gave us their trust, and we slowly tried to grow into other types of clients, other types of work. So it went from website, web design to more design in general, to content and social marketing, to traditional advertising and whatnot.
Nice. So tell us about your first big customer.
Yeah.
Like, I'm curious. I'm also curious how you financed the business at the beginning.
Yeah. We didn't, we financed our business through credit cards. We just masked up debt. When we got stable enough, we would get credit lines and just burn through credit lines with so much debt. So you just sort of go through the peaks and valleys. They say,
how much is so much?
At one point, we racked up close to $1 million.
Wow.
For a couple 20-year-olds is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then as we started to get bigger, payroll every other week was. I remember when it was $100,000 every other week that we'd have to find 100, and then it was 200, and then it was $500,000 that we had to find every other week. So that was just kind of the scary and exciting thing of having your own business. It's not about whether you can sign deals, but it's about managing the cash flow.
Yeah.
And one of the stats that we're really proud of is we never once laid off anybody because we had to or we couldn't afford them. We borrowed more money. We stopped paying ourselves. And I think in that way, I guess you collect a lot of stats over the years, but that was one that I was particularly proud of. Just trying to be good to the people that gave us their trust.
Yep. That's actually
so really... you asked about our first big client.
Yeah, go there. And I have another question from the chat I'm going to pick up in a second.
Oh, no, absolutely. So actually a friend from Cornell, Ginny, she was working at Deutsche Bank, and she introduced us to somebody at Deutsche Bank who was looking to redesign their website. And so we came in and we pitched the business before we had an office. And my one creative partner that we had brought on a little bit after we started, Charles, he had a big spiky red mohawk. And so we roll into this, global bank, present work. And we had some other clients at the time, like an energy drink company and whatnot. So we brought in some energy drinks, and luckily they hired us. And so the next order of business was finding an office. And actually that connection also came through a Cornell grad, somebody that I'd worked with while he was in the master's program. His uncle had office space in the city, and he was launching a restaurant/bar and needed a website. So I said, listen, we'll do the website for you for free if you give us 5 months of rent. And so we got the big client, we got the office space, we got another client that wasn't paying us money, but doing cool work. So it's just kind of like a little baby steps.
Yeah, and then did you have to scale up people-wise also?
We started off within, we leaned into a lot of the contacts that we had, like how do you do project management? We earmarked off pieces of work that we knew we needed to outsource to developers and other staff. We started hiring interns, and then all the other logistical things you have to worry about as well, as far as insurance and workers' comp and,
Oh, right.
and all
All
that
that,
kind of good stuff, and the
all,
taxes and all that,
all
all the
that
fun
boring
stuff.
stuff, all that
Yeah,
boringness,
yeah,
all those boring
yeah,
necessities. So,
yeah.
so I'm gonna read this question. It's kind of long,
Please.
but let
Yeah.
me just read it for everybody. It says, I often encounter a missing middle in working with entrepreneurs. Either they think very mom and pop, like a donut shop, or they see
Mhm.
themselves pitching them as rock stars, like trying to get unicorn status. Yet from the sound of it, you were what today's grads call a maker, starting something to solve a problem, meet a need, and refining from there. You also note that you didn't particularly want to be the CEO at the start and learned as you grew. Any wisdom for alumni on the risks of the Silicon Valley glamour approach, as opposed to the long path of solving a problem, meeting a need, and building stuff?
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, I haven't been on the Silicon Valley side yet. I've, kind of dabbled in it from an investment perspective, but not been funded by a big VC firm. We had offers along the way from venture capital, private equity, some big names too, but we just opted not to until the date that we sold. And at that point, we had offers from VC, private equity, and other places, but we wanted to go with Publicis Group. I think it's a little hard for me to say, just not knowing both sides of the equation there. But I think personally, the long grind that we had was, I don't know, simultaneously a sprint and a marathon at the same time. So I think, if one of the things you need is resilience or just kind of that endurance to get through kind of the lows and not too inflated during the highs.
Yeah.
I think that long bit of stretch of time that we had helped build that from a character perspective.
Yep.
But it's a little hard to say as far as what it's like on the other side, just given that I haven't personally been there.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I deal with a lot of companies in my VC world, and I think there are many more companies that take a longer time to build than there are the 3-year, invest and exit.
Yeah.
I think the ones that we read about more are the ones that grow explosively and get sold quickly or go public quickly. But it takes a long time to build a company. I just ordered a Rivian pickup truck.
Yeah, nice.
Okay, the company's been around for 12 years. Nobody knew it. Okay, so until recently, they haven't heard of the name.
Yeah.
I hope to get the truck in January. We'll see. But I mean, it's interesting. I think that the slow build is actually way more common.
Yeah, and I think probably the biggest differentiator, now that I think about it, would be the capital, right? So if what you need is to grow your customer base, you need to build a brand, you need to expand all your sales channels, or then that requires a significant amount of capital.
Yep.
So that is probably the huge benefit there. I think from our perspective, all of our investment into sales, marketing, branding, et cetera, was from the profits that we've made, year over year, and also just on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
But that probably is the big differentiator. And I think it's different from category to category. Some require more capital to build and create the market.
So from 2000 until you sold in 2012, which was, again, I want to put that sale conversation off for a second, but did you not raise outside capital?
We had offers. I think we were pretty rare in the space because we got started early as a digital agency, and there were a handful of really reputable ones, and I'd like to think that we were one of them. And so we've had a lot of interest coming in different ways, but we always opted not to. We didn't want to give up the equity, and at the same time, we thought we weren't at capacity as far as what we could do and what we could bring to the table. So we held on to everything. So everything was predominantly through credit lines and through credit cards. Luckily, when we sold, we paid off all of our debts. We had zero debt. We retained 100% equity in the company.
Right.
And so that actually worked out in the back end. But in the process, I think the other was just the unknown of not knowing what it would be like to have somebody else's money in the business or somebody else owning a part of the company. So I think, and being young, because we were mostly in our 20s, wanting to have that full autonomy and that full control was a big deal.
Yep.
And plus we had no kids. Our expenses were pretty low. So I think it was more of a lifestyle choice too, I guess.
Right.
That's probably that.
Well, it's actually interesting because it was in a sense, a services business. I mean, you were providing a service to clients. You were able to grow through cash flow. I mean, you got new clients and there was receivables and you could finance that eventually. By the way, I'm glad you paid off those credit cards. I always like to think back. A couple of years ago, I interviewed one of the founders of the Laundress, which was this big, fast-growing laundry detergent and laundry consumer products company. Environmentally everything and safe.
I know them.
And it's like one of my all-time favorite interviews. And Gwen Whiting, the person I was interviewing, she mentioned how she was just maxing out credit cards, like one after the other. Like they would apply for one, pay it off. They would just keep going around in circles. And it got a lot of eye rolls, but I think it's actually not that uncommon. So.
No, I would write checks that I knew would bounce just to pay off the credit cards, which I would pay off with the credit card. My parents didn't have a lot of money, so I just made sure I wasn't drowning them in my problems.
Right.
The two unfortunate wedding gifts I gave my wife, one was the credit card debt, because that was before we were debt free. We got married in 2004. And the other was the news that I hadn't gotten my diploma yet, just because I never finished my thesis because I started this company right after. So she made me rectify both of those real soon. So that's actually much credit to her.
That's actually great. And by the way, for those that are wondering, when I look up, I'm looking at my other screen. I don't want folks on the webinar to think I'm doing anything other than paying attention. So somebody asked, what was firing your first employee like? If you can remember. I think that's a funny question.
Well, first off, it's easier to do when you're a privately held company versus being part of Publicis Group. It was weird. It was intense. I think we were pretty good about not firing people so abruptly, but it was weird. It was so weird. But because I'm the first employee may or may not have been older than us at the time, because we were probably just barely in our 20s. So
right.
Or toward the back half of our 20s. So yeah. And it was always a little sad too. We had such a good family and it was so fun. So needing to sort of part ways with anybody was difficult. But we had people who would just sleep in meetings and silly stuff that just, in my mind, warranted that action. But it's always kind of a weird thing.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your founder was still in school when you started the company, but it wasn't, was it another Cornell person, or was it person from?
No, he graduated from Pace.
Okay.
Yeah, we met at our first job. So at the first company I was at, he was interning at the time.
Okay.
And we said, hey, let's make a company. We're like, sure, that sounds like a great idea. So like, what do you know? Nothing.
Right. And eventually at Roken, you ended up with some really marquee brands, not just Deutsche Bank, but Virgin, JetBlue, and Stoli, and a whole bunch of others. Can you tell us a bit about how you actually got to acquire those companies? Was it word of mouth? Was there an active sales campaign? I'm curious.
So it was all of the above. And so when I think of sales, I think of it in a pretty simple way, right? And I think ultimately sales is pretty easy. If you think about your conversion rate, like how many of the leads that come in that you convert, if it's 20%, make it 30, make it 40, obviously you'll win more deals. The other one is lead volume. So if you can't improve your conversion rate, just improve the number of deals that flow in. And the lead volume you can play around with when you become a little methodical about the channels, all your different sales channels. So some of it is networking, some of it was just with awards, some of it was direct outreach, a lot of it was events. And so we just kind of broke everything down into all the different channels where we needed to operate as far as where we would get leads. And then we just made sure that we applied pressure to each channel. And it seemed to work out pretty good. So some of those clients were were me knocking on doors. Some of it was a friend of a friend. I think Chung had a friend at the NBA. And at one point we did the NBA.com, the WNBA.com, a number of the team sites. So it was just a mix of everything really. But I think, the one unifying thing was just that persistence. We just were on it all the time.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it was incredible. And then
it was the pressure of the payroll.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that payroll pressure adds a lot of incentive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So when you started, you were just a couple people. Do you remember how many people you had? I'm just going to throw out some random years, like around 2005. How many people were you?
Oh my gosh. 2005. We were probably still 5 people. Like for the first 6 years, I think.
Yeah.
It was just probably less than 10 people.
Okay.
I mean, we were still figuring it out. We had the weight loss pill and the protein powder company paying some of the bills, and we were making no money whatsoever. But I guess that's what happens when you have no experience. So it took us a while to build and earn that. In 2006, we won like one of our biggest marquee clients, which is Virgin America. We launched virginamerica.com. That was kind of a big deal, and that sort of led us into a bunch of other things. So
then let's say by 2008, were you 15 people? I'm just trying to, I kind of want to know the trajectory up until 2012 when you sold to Publicis.
Yeah, it's kind of a blur, I'll be honest. I remember we were looking at one office, which was a beautiful office on Kenmare and Lafayette, probably one of our favorite offices. And we're working with the architect, and they're saying that we can fit, 25 people here in this particular configuration. We're like, we'll never be that big. There's no need. Let's make it. And then next thing you know, we're at 40 people and busting out of the seams.
Yeah.
By 2012, we're probably 130 people. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And I'm also curious, you mentioned this, with the artistic, like full-on artistic need inside the company to develop new enticing sites and strategies. I would think that being together is actually pretty important, because there's a lot of energy that flows that you probably can't get over Zoom.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't want to focus on the pandemic at all, but I'm just curious, like, do you agree with that for an agency like yours, like being together is almost always better?
I think for us, 100%, just because it's such a people-oriented business, and what we sell often are ideas and concepts.
Yeah.
And ideas and concepts that need to be implemented by, technicians of different types.
Yeah.
That the teamwork is really important. People coming together to sort of spark and inspire those ideas is really important. So I think by nature of our business being a people company, it really needed to be.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, I think it probably depends a lot on the personalities as well, and the dynamics that exist. But for us, during the time that we had, well, it was probably necessary, but it was also super fun. We just had so much fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. It must be a lot of fun being around all those creative people like all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually really cool. So now let's fast forward to 2012. You're up to, I don't know, around 50 million in sales or so on the top line.
It was right. We hit just under 50 probably a few years ago.
Okay, so back in 2012,
we were still lower. Yeah, we were probably somewhere between 15 to 20.
Okay, and at that point, what motivated you to sell the business?
Sure. So we came close on a couple deals, a couple big holding companies where we went through, all of the proper steps, had the term sheet in hand. And then me and my 2 other partners at the time just kind of stood around and decided whether we wanted to take the leap or not. And so there were 2 moments where we came really, really close. In both moments, we decided we weren't ready, that there were still more that we could try, that we weren't quite done doing it on our own.
Yep.
In 2012, 2011, 2012, we had a ton of growth. We won JetBlue, American Express, Stoli, a bunch of others. And so we felt like to really capitalize on the success that we had then, that if we had a partner or holding company or capital, that we could really take it to the next level. And that was the intention. So in fact, when we were in the sales discussions, we didn't, we coined it not our exit strategy, but our entrance strategy. Like we were looking forward to the next stage and the next step.
The next phase of business life.
Yeah. And so, and after that, the business doubled. So, it was really exciting and involved too, and offering new types of work as well.
Okay. And I'm assuming that when you sold in 2012, that the company was profitable at that point in time?
Yeah, we were, so thanks to Chung, my partner at the time, we were extremely profitable, like north of 30%.
Okay.
And granted, after we got out of all the debt.
Right.
So there were some years that weren't as great, but at the time we just had the best numbers that we'd ever had, high growth, high profit, and all that.
Yeah, and Chung was Chung the original founder?
Yeah, he and I started the company.
Yeah, so you stuck with it the whole time together. Which is actually that's a feat in and of itself. Which is fabulous. Did you have
still do real estate together? So
yeah, that's great. Did you have multiple offers when you decided to sell?
Yes, we had from private equity, VC, other holding companies. I think we had a total of 5 or 6 offers.
Okay.
And we hired a banker to sell the company for us. The first 2 times we'd been pursued, and then we brought in a banker, a professional, to take a look at the deal, and they gave us advice. But when we were ready to go, we brought on somebody to help orchestrate the deal. Okay.
Are you looking back for a tombstone or something?
Yeah, I thought I had their. Oh yeah, they're right there. De Silva and Phillips. These are the guys that we brought on.
That's great.
John Kaiser, he's great.
Yeah, and Publicis, I would consider them to be a strategic buyer, as opposed to a private equity shop. Did that factor into your decision?
Yeah, we just grew to really love the advertising business, all the creativity, and I think we, for so much of our, I guess different parts of the year, different parts of our growth, we were sort of the outsiders looking in. We were below the line, they were above the line, as far as advertising lingo goes. And so we thought it'd be really cool to be with one of the largest holding companies in the world. And we had met a bunch of them and had a number of offers. The people that we met at Publicis Group, we really connected with and thought were fantastic. So that's what drew us in. Yeah, that's gotta be so important. I have another question about your tenure after you sold, because you stayed on for a long time. But before we get there, someone raised a question that I think is interesting. Were there times before you sold in 2012 that you just thought enough is enough, let's stop? Yeah, a lot. Was it like every year? Yeah, you know what? It's so funny. We had so much debt, and it was enough where it was like a ball and chain. You were stuck to this debt, so you could leave and figure out how to pay it off yourself. Yeah, or declare bankruptcy, or you could just put your head down and grind. So the debt was good and bad for us, but I think in general all of us were very strong-willed. We knew it was just a matter of time before we'd figure it out. I think every year we started to figure out something, almost like chapters of a book. It was the thing that we were trying to do each year, whether it was get more direct clients or become more of a creative agency and other things. Right. But it's tough. I mean, and some of the problems that you have to deal with are things that you don't necessarily expect, whether it's client related or a delivery goes bad, or it's more operational or it's cash flow related. There's a lot of things that just sort of, become very stressful. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm glad we never did, and I would do it all over again. It was so much fun. Well, it sounds like you are almost doing it all over again with you. Yeah, in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. So you stayed on for 8 more years. I mean, and now in my experience, that's a really long time for a founder to stay on.
Yeah.
Did Chung also stay on?
Yeah, we left right around the same time.
Okay.
Um,
So I mean, it that's like an eternity in my experience. So I am curious. I know that you called it your entrance, not an exit, but I guess that probably factored into why you stayed on so long because you wanted it to grow more. Um,
yeah, yeah,
Love
it's
to hear
almost
about
as
that.
if regardless of when the acquisition was, you start this thing and it's kind of your baby, and you have this vision for what you think it can be when it grows up.
Yeah,
And in our minds, we weren't done, as we wanted it to be a particular way, and to be pretty as disruptive as we could get within the category.
yeah,
And so we kept winning new clients, bigger clients, relationships continued to grow. We became the global creative agency for Cadillac. And now it's really exciting. And then I guess as COVID started to hit, and maybe the last couple of years, I started to have maybe a bit more of an itch wanting to do something different. I think with good intention, they kind of bring you into more of the corporate executive things.
yeah,
But I think, where my happiness lied was in, making something from nothing and
yeah,
being a little bit more hands-on.
yeah,
And so I just missed that. So I, decided to leave and figure it out.
yeah. I'm so glad you said happiness because I find myself giving that. I don't want to really say advice, but I'm not sure what other word to use. Like someone will say, "Oh, what should I do? A or B?" And like the first thing out of my mouth is always, "Well, what's going to make you happier?"
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, where should I live? San Francisco or Denver?" Well, do you like to ski? Like, like what's going to make you happier? Like, you can
Yeah.
do easier in Denver. I mean, so I think it's actually really, really important. So I'm really
Well,
glad you brought that up.
yeah, it's huge. And I think you hear all these stories of very successful business people getting to a certain age, a certain level of success, the success that they were chasing all their lives, and then getting it and realizing that they'd missed, so many other parts of their lives and so many other
Right,
people.
right.
And so I think I was lucky in that we sold the company, while I was relatively, young, um, and we're able to kind of get that life lesson a bit earlier on.
Yep.
So yeah, so I think a lot of what drove me was also thinking about lifestyle, just wanting to be
Yeah,
with the kids and seeing them grow up more and all that.
absolutely. Another interesting question. I think I know the answer to it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Um,
So it's an easy question.
it is pretty easy. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
If I know the answer, it's got to be easy. What tangible or proprietary assets did Rokin have that Publicis wanted?
Sure. Well, I can answer that in a couple parts. So when we first started the company, we tried to figure out what was unique and special about us. And I think we decided, and I think it was the right choice to make, that we had none. There was nothing unique or special about us, and anybody else could do the same thing. So that what we can control is, how hard we try in winning business, how hard we try in delivering work, how many hours that we can squeeze into a day, over anybody else, and sort of the persistence that we have and not giving up when things get tough. And I think by virtue of that, I mean, people would work at our firm and create so much stuff in their portfolio and say it's the most that they've ever done in their career, just because that was the speed at which we operated. We
Right.
operated, at maximum speed all the time. I think that was a large part of the success that we had. When they were acquiring us, it was that moment when traditional advertising was obviously going through a lot of flux, more data, more digital, more technology. And so they were looking for interesting components to put into the holding company, and to put up against some of the more traditional assets they had. So since we had launched big e-commerce sites, big loyalty programs, and had a lot of direct digital relationships, I think
Well,
that's
and
just sort of
you had a
the
marquee
impetus.
customer base too. So obviously they wanted
Yeah,
your customers. They wanted your cash flow, but there's nothing. I mean, you're a services business. I mean, it's a bunch of really creative people doing a really cool thing.
yeah,
And I think you're right. I mean, other folks. I mean, you have lots of competitors. It's a real question about how you can deliver. Um,
absolutely.
Sounds That sounds like you delivered really, really well. So, okay, let's switch gears. You've now transitioned out. Chung has transitioned out. You said also, which I think is interesting, though not really so surprising. So, what's keeping you busy now besides the family life? On the business front, what's keeping you busy?
Yeah, so well, you mentioned Chung. So Chung and I have been doing commercial real estate, some development that we're doing in Williamsburg, and so that's been really exciting. I'm less involved just because that's more his passion and area of focus. So a good friend of mine and his wife had started Yobo Soju, which you had mentioned before, back in 2015. And he had asked for help because part of what you need to do in a business like that is grow and build the brand, and obviously the marketing and everything. And at the time I was too busy, I couldn't do it. But after I left, we reconnected and decided to work together and trying to build this thing up. And so I came on as the CEO and I started in January. And it's been really exciting.
January of 2021?
2021.
Yeah.
So we've doubled our volume this year. We're expanding into all these new states. We're launching new products and new brand extensions. So it's been really cool. And part of what I really wanted to do, maybe almost sort of a test to myself, that I could be successful in a business that wasn't the same or service oriented, just want to do something completely different. And so the things that we kind of have to wrap our heads around is just kind of wild. Like, how do I get a container from China to California? how do I find the best rates? It's pretty nuts, but it's been wild.
And have you been able to apply some of your artistic work as well? Did you redo the branding?
Yeah. So when we started Roken, I was the main designer, and then I brought on Charles, who took over because I thought he was better than me. And so now I'm still doing a lot of the creative packaging, branding, design. And we've gotten advice from other people. We've gotten some other folks to sort of put in input as well. I think there's just a particular vision that I have for how I want these to come to life, to the extent that we're doing custom glass bottles that I sketched out while on vacation in Florida, and I sent it to our guy. He's like, all right, I'm gonna get a 3D model, and sent it over and all that. So it's been super, super hands-on, but I think that's the piece that I was missing, just being able to actually do something one day that has a real material effect, you know, on the company is pretty profound. Yeah,
that's actually really interesting. Explain to me and our audience some of the Cornell connections, just because you've already mentioned some already, but I always like the network, the Cornell network never seems to disappoint, but you do have to do a lot of work to use it. It's not like someone's just going to hand it to you on a plate. It sounds like you've done that. So I'm curious just to what the other Cornell connections are with the current beverage.
Yeah. So the founders, Carolyn Kim and her husband, James Kuhn, went to Cornell. We were the same year. And the product is produced from Finger Lakes Distilling. And the founder and owner of that company is Brian McKinsey, who also went to Cornell our same year. I didn't know him at the time, but he's also a Cornell grad. So
did you know the other guy, the husband of James? The founder?
Yeah, we knew each other, I want to say probably since freshman year.
Okay. That's actually really, really interesting. I want to just switch back to, I'm trying to read these questions on the chat. So having been through the long grind, as you put it, can two concepts be developed by the same entrepreneurial group at the same time? Or does a successful venture necessitate that one idea needs to be abandoned to focus entirely on the other one?
Yeah. You know, I think that also probably comes down to the other point around capital, because that affords resources.
Yeah.
You know, so if you were bootstrapping it, I think running two companies at the same time would be really, really difficult. Because only at a certain point, there's only so many hours in the day, and probably only so much mental power and focus. I mean, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I think probably the capital would help being able to hire, you know, a CMO or a CFO, and you know, some of the other important skill set that you might need in bringing something to market. and I think it is a difficult. But the tricky thing being an entrepreneur is there's almost too many ideas, and you want
Yeah,
all of them.
yeah,
So I've gotten advice from people saying, to focus. So that's probably still there's probably a sort of a sweet spot um, in
yeah.
that equation.
It's actually very interesting. So you made the snap decision to start your own company. I call it a snap decision. I realize it wasn't like that, but you made a snap decision.
It's pretty accurate.
Okay, you made a snap decision to want to have children. That was a nice outcome. You kind of made a snap decision to leave Publicis, although you were responsible in your transition period, right? But did you made a decision quickly, like, okay, my time's up. I need to move on. And then you transitioned out. I'm still curious as to, like, the beverage company just sort of fell into your lap. I mean, it's sort of like, oh yeah, that sounds fun. I'm going to try it. Now, I know you had flexibility because you made out pretty well with the exit before, but it seems like that these things kind of just fall into your lap, which is great. And I'm curious to know whether that's true.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about the things that you choose to do and not the things that you don't choose to do.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of other discussions and things that I had in the past that I chose not to pursue. Some of them are too similar to what I'd done already, running another agency or doing that again. I just wasn't very keen on.
Yep.
The thing about the soju that I think it's such a challenge, because if you think of soju as a spirit, it's the largest volume selling spirit in the world, but not so much here in the States, right? So because it's mostly in Korea, mostly in Asia, and it's huge, immense volume. And so here's the potential of being ahead of something. If you think of tequila years back, because I'd done a lot of work in the spirits business before a Patron came to town and elevated tequila and made it more mass, because it was not seen as a high quality product prior.
Right.
And now you see all these tequila brands everywhere, doing so well, that we feel like, and it's hypothetical, that if we built the brand properly, built the products portfolio properly in all the different formats, that we could create the category here in the States. And so what's exciting about the growth that we're having right now is that most of the places where Yobo is ending up at retail are places that have never served or sold soju before. So we're breaking into new markets. Granted, the flip side of that is, all right, now we have to create the demand, and that becomes a little costly. But as far as like where we need to be, it feels like physically the brand is where it needs to be. There from a moment in time perspective with Asian culture and Korean American culture and Korean American food, it seems like that is becoming more and more mass and more mainstream. So we're really excited. We have a long vision as far as the things that we need to get done.
Yeah.
There's people that we've enlisted, like Kristen Kish, who was the first woman of color to win Top Chef. We're creating our first flavored line with her.
Okay.
So we're building the pieces, and we're also launching a secondary brand that's more mass, that will operate under a different name, different formats, etc. So there's a lot going. It's almost like you could just put together a board with all of our ideas, and we just said, all right, let's do everything.
So I'm curious, is the capitalistic outcome a motivator on this one? Like, I mean, because this has the potential to get quite big. I mean, if it's the largest beverage in the world in Asia, it could get pretty big. I mean, is that a motivator for you and your team?
It is, but not. And I would have this conversation with my wife too, because didn't grow with money, and I think it is a very slippery, dangerous slope when you're overly focused on how much you need to make, like I was talking about before.
Yep.
But I kind of said it's almost like points in a video game. It's like so important to have a high score. I don't know why. It's just mentally and emotionally it is. And so the capital nature of it is really appealing. And maybe there's ego or pride involved, but we want to create the category here in the States, and we're going to do it we're hoping to do it with our brand and other brands that we create and other partnerships that we find.
Yeah.
But and the thing that has been the nice byproduct of this has been how it's connected me deeper into my culture, heritage, and obviously with some of the things that have been happening with Asian Americans in this country too.
Right.
I don't know. It's been really exciting at a lot of different layers.
Yeah, that's actually great. And let's talk about some of that Korean heritage work that you're also doing. But let me ask one more question before that.
Yeah.
How have you financed the current company? Outside investment? Is it all internal?
It's all self-funded. So
Okay.
we just write checks. And we write a bunch of checks.
So almost the same philosophy as Roken. I mean, you want to keep control. You're going to keep writing checks. You might get some offers from from CPG investors eventually, but you might not need their money.
Yeah, we're working through. I mean, so there's a couple things. We need to sell more products so that we can fund our sales and marketing. So to the point where we can grow or gain our marketing and sales budget from our cash flow. But yeah, I think the other point is just when we'll be ready to seek capital and why. We do intend to look for outside investment just because to really do this right, once all of the pieces are on the board and lined up, we know that we're going to drop a significant amount of capital down. So we do intend to raise, but just those pieces aren't ready yet, and they slowly are, because every day it's like one little piece gets pinched over. And
I'm sure there are pieces that you're not even aware of yet.
Yeah, that too.
Probably some new pieces that will just pop up.
Yeah. So we do plan to, but right now we're still in build mode, and we're fine with, we're not lacking in funds for what we need to do right now. But once we start driving the market, that'll be a different story. Right.
Interesting. Okay, let's talk a bit about some of the Korean heritage sort of non-business ventures that you're involved with. You can just go ahead and explain some, because I'm actually curious to learn more.
Yeah, so I've been advising a couple different companies too. One is a video game advertising publisher called Relentlo, and they're great. They're two guys. The two founders dropped out of Berkeley. I'm pretty sure they're 19 years old. They seem really young, but really, really great. And they're just about to close their first big raise. There's another company that we're doing, trying to help nonprofit organizations raise money through NFTs and selling NFTs. And so that's been exciting too, getting that off the ground. And we brought on a couple nonprofits and are trying to tap into a very different world of currency.
Explain more about that other world of currency, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I mean, I've done work with nonprofits over the years, and a lot of the challenge that they suffer from is donor fatigue. Every year there's the same number of people who give the same amount of money, so it's less about new money coming into the market, but a different organization being able to pull it from the same audience.
Okay.
Whereas within the world of cryptocurrency and NFTs, there's just obviously it's completely different currency, and the volatility, and for all the different reasons, there's just so much activity there. And so the working theory is, if we can create digital assets, create connection to these causes, and tap a very different audience with very different funds, that we could create new revenue and new income for these nonprofits. And so that's just getting off the ground right now, but we're pretty excited about it. It's actually really nice being able to work on something that, where there's really good intent.
Right. So is the idea to create a digital asset for that's associated with a nonprofit, and then create enough momentum behind that asset that it can actually be sold as an NFT?
Sold both in the primary market and then again in the secondary market. So and we want to create it directly to projects that need to be done. So if we're working with an organization, let's say, needs to build roofs or a roof, kind of thinking about the dollars that they require, turning them into NFTs so that the transaction, the sale, goes to funding it, and the benefit for the buyer is also the tax deduction as well. And then as the asset, that NFT, the digital asset, continues to sell in the secondary market, with each purchase, funds continue to go back to the cause as well, creating a bit of a virtuous circle. So we're sort of in the beginning phase of that, but pretty excited about it. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And can you tell us anything about some of the nonprofits that you're working with?
Yeah, so the first one, our inaugural partner is called Black Tech Street. So for many of you guys who probably know, the massacre that happened in Tulsa 100 years ago, Tyrants Billingsley II is, I wouldn't say commemorating it, but using the centennial as the impetus to sort of fuel and bring back wealth to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so going from Black Wall Street, that was from 1921, to creating Black Tech Street here, or in Tulsa rather, and doing it through a combination of education, capital, infrastructure, and a number of other things as well. And they've gotten a number of corporate sponsors really helping them to launch, and it's been exciting. I mean, I think think of all the clients that I've had over the years, but being able to partner with somebody really trying to make a difference,
right,
in a way that's substantial, and then not just us asking for money so that we can run a campaign for them, but trying to create and raise funds for them is really powerful, and it feels good.
Yeah. I mean, do you see it? Do you see some of this nonprofit work as you being able to satisfy a need, like a personal need for giving back and kind of pursuing some social good, as opposed to the digital space, which is like, I mean, I don't really see a direct connection on the social good side. I guess, although I guess you could select customers that you believe are doing the right thing. And then also with the beverage company, there's probably not much of a social angle, in terms of a social good angle. But on the nonprofit side, it sounds like there seriously is.
Yeah, 100%. So the one thing that we did with Yobo when I first came on board, we ran an initiative in the very beginning. This is right as COVID was happening, or at least the impact of COVID was really being felt in New York and other areas.
Yeah.
We gave 100% of our profits to COVID-19 relief, and primarily through one of our partners, Rethink Food, who were taking the infrastructure of restaurants, supplying them with food so that they could prepare meals for undernourished communities, so that restaurants were staying open because they were being busy, the employees were making money, and communities were being fed. And then we've also donated to kind of Asian American relief as well. So it's been a good way to start kind of my time there. And we're thinking about what the brand means in its layers. And at the base, we think being a brand that cares about community, cares about unity, and all these things is really integral.
Yeah.
So that was the way that we kicked things off, and we hope to do quite a bit more as we continue to grow.
Yeah, that's actually fabulous. Well, you're not going to believe it, but it's already 1:00. So I just want to say I so appreciate your attitude towards business and growth and the kind of different factors. Also the serendipity that you seem to thrive on a bit. I really appreciate that as well. And I think it's a really good lesson. I think it's important for people to know that, for all the planning that you might want to do, a lot of times being an entrepreneur, you have to be extremely flexible and make decisions quickly. And planning isn't always at the top of the chart when it comes to making some pretty important decisions. So I think that's really great. So we're going to have to cut off. But before we do, just as a reminder to our audience, everything's being recorded today. You can view the recordings on both the EHC YouTube channel and also the CEN live stream channel, which are easy to find. We are taking July off on the webinar front. We've been doing these monthly. In fact, this is the second one we've done in June. We're going to take July off and be back in late August with hopefully one of our advisory council members and a senior executive at Autodesk. More details to follow on that. In the meantime, John, thanks again so much for joining us. And the rest of you have a wonderful summer now that it's officially begun yesterday. Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Yep, see ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.